Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Taklai, and today I would like to speak about the new lies of the Ethiopian regime. I'm going to explain later what I think they are new, and I'm going to use Redwan Hussein as an example, not because I believe Redwan is uniquely mendacious in the Ethiopian regime and the circle of people around Abiy Ahmed. I think most of you would agree with me that the entire Ethiopian edifice is built on grand lies. But because I believe that the specific tweet from Redwan that I have on the screen gives us some sort of insight into the new method of lying that they are trying to adopt following the agreement in South Africa, in Pretoria, a week ago between them and the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front. So what I'm going to try to do is, number one, I'm going to show you why it's factually incorrect what Redwan has tweeted today. But also I'm going to try to tell you what I think they are trying to achieve with this new style of lying. So the tweet, if you're not listening to me with the YouTube app on the background, as you would see on the screen, the tweet said that 70% of Tigray is under the Ethiopian National Defense Forces, ANDF. Aid is flowing like no other times, even to the areas not yet held by the Ethiopian National Defense Forces. 35 trucks of food and 3 trucks of medicine arrived in Shire. And flights are allowed. Services are being reconnected. The agreement just provides opportunities to enhance services. And on his second tweet, he goes on to say, no hindrance whatsoever regarding aid. Some corners don't seem happy by the fact that African wisdom brought a success in Pretoria and hustling to spoil the spirit. So never mind that the English is only Redwan Hussein, but let's go sentence by sentence. And then, so that would be for the factual investigation of the tweet, and then I'm going to tell you what I think Redwan's thinking is and why he's blatantly lying, and why we should expect that this would become a norm, not just from individuals from the Ethiopian regime, but also from its own control, from the state-controlled media and also the client activists, journalists, and so-called public intellectuals and everybody. So 70% of Tigray under Ethiopian National Defense Forces. Now that's a lie. Number one, I would say more than 50% of Tigray is still under the control of the Tigrayan Defense Forces. Why do I say that? We know that almost the entirety of, maybe not the entirety, but more than half of central Tigray, from Tembien to Hausien, is still under the occupation of Tigray Defense Forces. We know that most parts of southern Tigray are under the control of the Tigray Defense Forces. We know that most parts of eastern Tigray, from Adigrat inwards, are under the control of the Tigray Defense Forces, and if you add everything up, that's more than 50%. So, and that is without, even in Western Tigray, a lot of villages under the occupation of, under the control of the Tigray Defense Forces. So I think you'd agree with me that more than 50% of Tigray is still under the control of the Tigray Defense Forces. Not that that matters, especially if the disarmament is going to be executed. So that is one reason why the first sentence is a lie. But also there is another reason, and that is that we know, unless you have been living under a rock for the past 2 years, you know that in addition to the Ethiopian National Defense Forces, there are Amhara forces, and most importantly, there are Eritrean forces operating in Tigray. And we know that Eritrean forces are occupying huge swath of Tigrayan territory in eastern Tigray, from Adigrat to Zalambesa to Badme. And in western Tigray, they are helping the Amharas maintain their control of western Tigray. And also, we know that the commanders of the Ethiopian National Defense Forces, starting from really top commanders, are Eritreans. So even granting that 70% of Tigray is not under the control of the Tigray Defense Forces, it wouldn't be true to say that it's under the control of the Ethiopian National Defense Forces. It would be under the control of the Ethiopian National Defense Forces and the Eritrean Defense Forces jointly, under the command of the Eritrean commanders, of Eritrean personnel, right? And the Amhara militia, and also in some parts of southern Tigray, or maybe southeast, to be more precise. We know that Afar militia are operating. So there's a hodgepodge of forces operating in Tigray. So it's not just Ethiopian National Defense Forces. So the first sentence is a blatant lie, and I think I have made the case for why. And the second sentence, aid is flowing like no other times. Now this is interesting. Because on the surface it would imply that aid is just flowing unhindered, but we know that that's not happening. We know that that's not happening, not just to the areas under the control of the Tigray Defense Forces. That we know nothing is getting into Tigray. We know that nothing has got into Mekelle. We know that nothing has got into Adigrat. We know that nothing has got into Tambien, and we know that nothing is getting into the Tigrayan villages under the control of the Tigray Defense Forces. So the third sentence, even to the areas not yet held by the NDF, is a complete lie, right? But even to areas that are under the control of the Ethiopian forces, we know what's happening. What's happening is a trickle of aid will go, but because Eritreans are in charge, they take whatever gets in, and they take it to Eritrea. They literally loot it. Not just loot the aid, but also they are going from house to house and looting everything. So even to the areas under the control of the Ethiopian National Defense Forces, in his wording, it wouldn't be true to say that aid is getting in, because we know who is in charge and we know for what purpose aid is being used. But anyways, and then Red One tells us that 35 trucks of food and 3 trucks of medicine has arrived in Shire. So there's something absolutely stupid in the way that he has constructed his tweet, because he tells us that aid is getting to areas controlled by NDF, and then also to areas not controlled by NDF. And normally you would expect to tell us how much aid has got into areas controlled by Tigray Defense Forces, because that's the way he started the first 3 sentences. But he doesn't tell us about how much aid has got into areas not under the control of ANDF. He tells us that 35 of food and 3 trucks of medicine has arrived to areas that they control, to the areas where he told us aid is flowing like no other time. So it's absolutely stupid the way that he's trying to lie. No attempt to be sophisticated or to be a bit kind of clever in the way that he's lying. But I'm going to say a few words why he didn't feel the need to be sophisticated or the need to be clever in the lie. Anyways, he then tells us that flights are allowed. Now, this is interesting. Okay, flights are allowed to where? Is it to areas controlled by ENDF? Is it to areas controlled to Tigray Defense Forces? To Mekelle, for instance, to Adigrat? Well, maybe there is no airport in Adigrat, so that wouldn't work. But to Mekelle, for instance, we know that's not the case. We know that flights are not allowed to Mekelle, but we also know that commercial flights are not allowed to Shire and to Himara and to Aksum either. So by flights are allowed, I don't know what he's trying to say. Because that's categorically untrue. Flights are not allowed, and no commercial flight has been operated so far. And even humanitarian flights have been prevented from departing from Addis. Why do I know that? Because there was a report on Reuters today, and a humanitarian worker based in Addis says anonymously that they are waiting to get permission from the Ethiopian regime to start delivering medicine through flight. So flights are allowed is a complete lie. But of course, he's not telling us that flights have been operated. He's simply saying that flights are allowed. But of course, the natural question would be, if flights have been allowed, why is it that no flight has made it to Tigray so far? What was holding them? And then he goes on to tell us that services are being reconnected, which is interesting. So he's not telling us that services have been reconnected, because then that would mean that we would be able to verify, because then we would ask why did that telephone connection is not working, why did that internet is not working, and all that, right? So he's not telling us that services have been reconnected. He's trying to be a bit clever here. He's telling us it's in the process of being resumed. They are being reconnected. But here again, from previous experience, we know that Redwan Hussein doesn't have any problem in simply in telling us something that is simply untrue. And then the final sentence, which I think is very interesting, because it kind of chimes in with what the regime had told us right before the agreement was signed. So the last sentence in the first tweet: the agreement just provides opportunities to enhance services. Now, this is true. This is what they think. They think that they have got what they wanted, almost everything that they wanted through the agreement. And they are going to use the fact that they control everything else, like services and stuff, as a bargaining chip to get the little thing that they think they haven't got through the agreement. So that would be a total control of Tigray by threatening to withhold aid and services and everything until Tigray totally capitulates, right? That's the thinking. And if you had read the statement that they issued a couple of days before they signed, before the TPLF was forced to sign the surrender deal, the Ethiopian regime said that the talks would be an opportunity to consolidate the military victory that they supposedly gained. So that's what Redwan is telling us in the final sentence, that the agreement has provided them opportunities to consolidate gains. And then in the second tweet, he goes on to say there is no hindrance whatsoever regarding aid. Complete lie. And then he fires a shot to some people who allegedly have expressed some sort of concern, as they would put it. Some corners don't seem happy by the fact that the African wisdom, it says African wisdoms, although there are 54 wisdoms in Africa, but I digress. African wisdom brought its success in Pretoria and hustling to spoil the spirit. So I think I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe that the illusion is Ireland here, because Ireland representative has been consistently expressing concern, and Ireland generally has been trying to expose the dirty tricks of the Ethiopian regime. So Redwan is kind of firing a warning to Ireland in the second tweet. So I think you would agree, all of you would agree with me, that every sentence, literally every sentence in the two tweets is categorically false, right? But there's one, there's a more fundamental point that I would like to make here, which is also why I felt the need to speak about this. There is some sort of tacit agreement, very kind of implicit agreement between the Ethiopian regime and the various actors in the international community, especially the ones who are going to fund and give loans to Ethiopia. And the agreement and that sort of agreement has manifested itself in the surrender deal, in the way that the deal has been written. The agreement is the following: the donors and the funders of Ethiopia have accepted that the Ethiopian regime could use starvation as a weapon. They don't have any problem with that, as long as the Ethiopian regime projects a facade of peace, and as long as it projects a kind of strength, and as long as it lies convincingly in terms of Tigray. It continues to say that Tigray has been contained. There is peace in Tigray. There is no problem in Tigray. They are more than happy and ready to release the funding and the loans that they have been withholding. So that is a tacit agreement that can't really be stated in public, because that would be against the law. But they know that they could break the law without making it explicit. And so all that the Ethiopian regime is expected to do is to continue to provide some sort of how would I put it? Some sort of excuse, or maybe I would put it as some sort of exculpatory excuse. So, for instance, if it continues to say that aid is flowing into Tigray, Tigray has been contained, 99% of Tigray is under the under the control of the Ethiopian National Defense Forces, then the various actors in the international arena would have reason for plausible deniability, and then they could continue to release the funding. And if push came to shove at some point, if somebody asked them, why is it that you are funding a regime that is starving its own people, they could always say, well, no, it hasn't been starving its own people. Aid has been flowing to all areas of Tigray. The National Defense Force of Ethiopia is in control of Tigray, as has been agreed. This is something that the Tigrayans themselves have accepted. So there was no reason for us to continue to withhold the funding and the loan. So they want to say that, and they want the Ethiopian regime to continue to give them that exculpatory or that excuse, so that they would be in a position to be able to defend themselves if they were to be accused of by either legal accusation or moral accusation. They could always defend themselves. So the reason Redwan Hussein is now desperately saying this is because he knows that this lie, although he knows that he's lying, although he knows that everybody else knows he's lying, he also knows that the lie has a utility. It has some sort of function, and the function is the donors of Ethiopia, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and the other entities that are literally, jolting to fund the Ethiopian regime. For some of you might say why, but I think we know the reasons why. There's market interest in wanting to fund Ethiopia and resuscitate the Abiy regime to normalcy, and to pretend that Abiy is a reformer and all that. I think that is a well-traveled road. Lots of people have spoken about why it did that. The World Bank and the IMF and other entities are so interested in looking the other way as Abiy commits horrendous crimes and continue to flood him with money. So I think if there is one takeaway point from my ranting, it would be the following: that no one should be surprised by the blatant lies and by the in your face kind of lies, and that's also the reason why Redwan didn't feel the need to be sophisticated, because he knows that what he's tweeting is not going to be believed, really, but it has its own purpose. It has its own purpose. He's just planting something that could be of use to the people who would like to fund Ethiopia, regardless of what it is doing to grants. So the lies are going to get even more blatant and even more mendacious, and no one should really be surprised. But we can't really be idle. We can't be passive in the face of this. I think we have to. When I say we, I mean everybody who number one understands the suffering in Tigray and who would like to speak up for Tigrayans, not just because of personal connection to the Tigray people, but also out of respect to humanity, because ultimately it's humanity that's being attacked in Tigray. But also, people who have some sort of interest in justice. There is no way that the Ethiopian regime should be allowed to continue to do this kind of barbaric attack on its own people. So people should continue to expose, not to inform people. I think people know what's happening. But we have to tell the IMF, the World Bank, and the other entities that we know what they are doing, that they're not really, we're not being taken for a ride by their lies and by their complicity and all that. So that is the point that I wanted to make today, and thank you for the listen.